Buckle up and prepare yourself. These are going to be some scorching hot takes for the running back position. Probably have not heard any of these before because nobody would be dumb enough to put these on a video. But hell, I'm not afraid of making myself look like an idiot. I do it all the time. And before we do it, please make sure you go down there, drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you play fantasy football and you want to win your league this season. I don't want to waste your time. Let's go into it. Let's talk about these hopefully 10 hot running back takes for this upcoming year. And our first one's going to be that Mr. Joe Mixon, my guy from last year. My favorite target in round 2, my favorite fantasy football start last season was Devontae Adams, Joe Mixon, then round 3, DeAndre Swift. I'm going to be going right back to the well. Joe Mixon currently with an ADP in the second round. My take is he finishes ahead of Derrick Henry in 2022 fantasy football PPR formats. Now, I understand if you go through and you look at the points per game from Joe Mixon versus Derrick Henry over the past 3 years, Derrick Henry has crushed him across the board. Derrick Henry, 115 yards per game. Derrick Henry, over a touchdown per game over the past 3 years. Derrick Henry, on average, the running back 3 over the past 3 years, and he's only getting better. It's crazy to see Derrick Henry over the past 3 seasons consistently improve from a fantasy football standpoint, outside the injury, of course. We go ahead, we compare this to Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon down there at 92 total yards a game. Joe Mixon over the past 3 years, instead of being over a touchdown a game like Derrick Henry, sitting at 0.7 touchdowns per game. And instead of being the running back 3 overall, he's the running back 12 on that per game basis. But I'm looking at the 2 running backs and saying, hell, while, Joe Mixon was drafted way back in 2017, hilarious to see that Mixon's been in the NFL this long. He was in that 2017 class with guys like Cooper Kupp, Leonard Fournette, Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara. But despite this, Joe Mixon legitimately, like last week, just turned 26. Joe Mixon is pretty much a 25, 26-year-old running back compared to Derrick Henry turning 28 back in January. Now, of course, we can't just say, oh, Joe Mixon's going to outscore him because he's younger. If you were to just leave the analysis at that, you'd be a straight up clown. I'll be the first person to admit it. But if we dive a little bit deeper into the situation that these running backs have been playing in over the past 3 years, it's very telling because we go back to 2019 for Joe Mixon. What was the context of this Cincinnati Bengals offense? I mean, you go ahead, you look at 2019 for Cincinnati. This was a team that was the worst team in the NFL. They went 2-14. This is what led them to go out and earn Joe Burrow, to get Burrow with the first overall pick. They started Andy Dalton. They started Ryan Finley. It was disgusting. On average, these quarterbacks had an adjusted yards per attempt at 5.9 this season. And we go ahead, look at their offensive line grades this year. You had the Cincinnati Bengals as the 30th best offensive line in the NFL. So they had a bottom 3 unit back in 2019. We go ahead, we look at 2020. Very similar situation. While, you had Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow was a rookie. Joe Burrow at the same time, of course, suffered a season-ending injury. You only had 10 games out of Joe Burrow. You had to deal with Brandon Allen. You had to deal with Ryan Finley for Joe Mixon. So it's unfair to look at Mixon in that type of scenario as well, given the fact that it was a very bad team. They earned a top 5 NFL pick. And to go along with this, they also had a bottom 3 offensive line in the NFL. Now we go ahead, look at 2021. Finally, the Cincinnati Bengals are good. Finally, they have Joe Burrow healthy the entire season. You have Jamar Chase to take the top off of opposing defenses. And all of a sudden, Joe Mixon has that breakout. Joe Mixon finishes the running back 7 on a points per game basis. You see the touchdowns per game take a dramatic step forward, despite the fact that his volume on a per game basis really didn't go anywhere. Goes from averaging 19 carries a game to 8 carries a game, 4 targets a game to 3 targets a game. Pretty much the role was the exact same, but when the offense is better, you're going to expect the efficiency and the overall amount of trips to the red zone for Joe Mixon to increase his overall fantasy football value. Now, we look at this upcoming season. Right now, PFF has the Cincinnati Bengals offensive line graded out to be a top 10 unit in football. Should be the best Joe Mixon's line has ever been throughout his entire NFL career. On top of it, you have Joe Burrow going into his second year starting an entire year. You have Jamar Chase going into year 2. You have T. Higgins going into year 3. And potentially, with the upgraded offensive line, not only are you going to expect a more efficient rushing game overall, but they could also look to push the pace of play, something we've been talking about all offseason with Cincinnati. So Mixon, the younger running back by almost 3 years, Mixon, the player in an ascending offense, is now dealing with the better situation than he's ever had. If we look at the past 3 years, the Cincinnati Bengals have averaged the 27th best offensive line in the NFL, according to PFF. That's over the past 3 years. Mixon has had a bottom 5 offensive line, where we go ahead and we look at the Tennessee Titans. Oh no, Tennessee's been pretty damn good over the past 3 seasons. They were good enough to go ahead and get the bye week in the AFC last year. They won the conference. They were first in the conference last season. I mean, this was a team that was 12-5 the year before that. They were 11-5 the year before that. They were 9-7. You had Derrick Henry in his prime years, his age 25, 26, 27 season, going out there and crushing it in a very efficient offense with a good offensive line. I mean, we go back to the Cincinnati Bengals averaging a bottom 5 unit during this time period compared to the Tennessee Titans averaging the 13th best offensive line in the NFL during this time period. So an average to above average offensive line. Tannehill was efficient. I think this was mainly due to the fact that A.J. Brown is such a damn good wide receiver. And if you look at the splits with and without A.J. Brown in this offense, there's a massive difference for Ryan Tannehill. So if I think that Tannehill is going to be a less efficient quarterback overall this upcoming season, and instead of having an above average offensive line in Tennessee, PFF is currently ranking this as the 27th best offensive line in the NFL. So now you have the Tennessee Titans projecting to be a bottom 5 offensive line in the NFL. You have Joe Mixon stepping into the best situation of his entire NFL career, and you have Derrick Henry stepping into the worst situation he has seen over the past 4 seasons. Throw on the fact that with Mixon here, he's going to have a much higher target share in his backfield than what Derrick Henry will. And as we said, Mixon stepping into his prime, his age 26 season. Derrick Henry at 28 years old. You have to be somewhat concerned. We go ahead, look at the past 5 years. 28-year-old running backs or older to have 250 carries in a season. Adrian Peterson, Frank Gore, and LaShawn McCoy. They finished as the running back 29, 28, and running back 9 on a points per game basis. Historically speaking, we need to be worried about the age cliff with the running back position. And I hope I did a decent job selling you on the actual risk associated with the profiles. I mean, if we go over and look at Underdog Fantasy right now, you have Joe Mixon, in my opinion, as one of the best values in these drafts. On Underdog Fantasy, Joe Mixon has an ADP of 13. You're getting him in the second round. I sometimes see CeeDee Lamb going before him. I've seen people advocating to take DeAndre Swift over Joe Mixon. Now, I'm taking Mixon as one of my most drafted players on Underdog. I advise you to do the same. I advise you to go have some fun. Go start drafting your fantasy football teams, or at least some of your fantasy football teams on Underdog Fantasy. Those best ball formats make it where there's no extra time commitment during the season for you, so you can tack on those drafts, practice for your main 2022 fantasy football league that you want to pay attention to. I'm in love with Underdog Fantasy. I'm about to eclipse 500 real money fantasy football drafts this year because there's nothing more fun than drafting over there on Underdog. And when you go and sign up for your first draft and use promo code FLOCK, they will match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to 100. And on top of it, you're going to get our 2022 rankings and our 2022 fantasy football draft guide that has pretty much every valuable statistic you'll ever need, almost 300 pages of quality fantasy football information. Make sure you take advantage of that. But let's go over and let's look at our next hot take. This one wouldn't be a hot take if it wasn't coming from this channel. As you know, I've gone out of our way and I've criticized Nick Chubb as a first-round selection as a committee running back that doesn't catch passes over the past 3 years in fantasy. I thought that Nick Chubb has been an overrated player in general, and I think we've been proven correctly in that you're taking Nick Chubb over a Jonathan Taylor last year. You're taking Nick Chubb over an Aaron Jones. These running backs that truly have elite ceilings, these guys that could break fantasy football, where Chubb doesn't really have it in the range of outcomes considering the fact that he is that committee running back. Well, now the narrative is switched on Nick Chubb. Now people have almost gone too far. And if we look at Nick Chubb in fantasy football drafts currently, he is now The running back 13 off the board. He now has an ADP of 25. You're getting Nick Chubb at the 2-3 turn. I've taken him in the 3rd round a ton this year on Underdog. And this is the year that I do think that Nick Chubb has league-winning upside. Now, the reason I'm saying this is the opportunity cost is dramatically different. You're not taking him over top 5 wide receivers anymore. You're not taking him over running backs that are the complete package. You're taking him in a range of players that they all have their own question marks, but they all have access to elite level ceilings, which I think Chubb's ceiling this upcoming season may be higher than we've ever seen, because we know the one thing this offense has been great at is running the ball over and over and over again. They've had the elite offensive line. They've had the coaching staff that wants to pound the ball up the middle. However, they have not had a quarterback that has to make defenses respect the pass. They've not had an offense that's been able to be top 5, top 10 in overall points scored and allow that 20 touchdown Nick Chubb season. But what if I were to tell you that potentially in 2022, Nick Chubb could play with the best quarterback of his entire NFL career? Now, of course, it's going to depend on how many games Watson's suspended. I'm not going to be too surprised if Watson's suspended for the entire season. It's hard for me to make this video because we simply don't know yet. But if Watson were to be suspended for only half the year, and then all of a sudden the Cincinnati Bengals have one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL playing behind one of the best offensive lines in the NFL, while yeah, they probably want to throw the ball a little bit more, the rushing efficiency and the red zone opportunities for a Mr. Nick Chubb will go through the roof. This is the year to draft Nick Chubb. His price has gone down too far. His situation, if anything, may be better. But now people finally understand that he's in a committee. Take him in the middle of round 3. Take him at the beginning of round 3. Take him at the end of round 2. Nick Chubb could be a league winner this season. Now, our next hot take is going to be that Breece Hall will be a top 10 running back after the first month of the season. I think if you're going to look at points per game, weeks 5 through 17, after we get Michael Carter Jr. phased out of this offense, all of a sudden Breece Hall is going to be that prototypical bell cow level running back that is going to be able to see work on passing downs that we know was able to dominate in his backfield at Iowa State. He was going out there and commanding about 23 touches per game. He was hyper efficient in that really bad offense at the same time. Now, yes, I understand you're in the Big 12. Trust me, I get it. I'm a University of Texas alum. I understand how bad our defenses are. But still, Breece Hall was dominant. He checks the box of an elite level running back prospect with the size, the workload, the athleticism, the passing down ability, in the NFL draft capital. Now, yes, I am personally concerned with this New York Jets offense, despite however many people in the comment section tell me that I'm a hater, despite how many people call me stupid. I still believe that Zach Wilson's going to be a very bad NFL quarterback, that this New York Jets offense, despite the fantastic moves they made this offseason, will be far below average in 2022. Running backs can overcome the lack of offensive efficiency, while wide receivers may need to have that efficient passing down quarterback, while wide receivers may need to have a quarterback that can be top 10 in adjusted yards per pass attempt, define that truly elite level ceiling. Running backs we've seen time and time again be able to overcome bad offenses in the face of just massive volume, which I think Breece Hall will be able to elevate his play to be a top 10 running back and be comparable to what we had from James Robinson about 2 years ago, despite Hall being a much better running back than James Robinson. Now, let's go to our next bold claim. This one's going to be the hottest, okay? This one is going to be spicy. And maybe I'm just biased because I found myself drafting him a ton over the past few weeks now that he is currently going in the 8th round on Underdog Fantasy. Clyde Edwards-Helaire will be a top 12 running back this season. Now, yes, you go through, you look at what CEH has done over the past 2 years, and you can laugh in my face. You can say, Mason, you clown. How can you tell me that the running back 29 last year, the running back 23 his rookie season, is all of a sudden going to be a running back 1 in his offense where they're really nothing pointing in the right direction with his trend line from year 1 to year 2. If anything, this is a running back that's getting worse. He has a lower carry percentage in his backfield from year 1 to year 2, a lower target share in his offense. He has less yards per game. Clyde Edwards-Helaire last year was a horrible, horrible running back. And with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I want to be on record in saying that I think he's a bad NFL running back. If we were playing Madden, if we were just in a massive room with 100 people drafting NFL teams, if I turned around and talked to my guys, I was like, okay, guys, who do we want at running back? Who's a more talented player? Clyde Edwards-Helaire or Tony Pollard, we're all going to be in consensus. Pollard's the better guy. Pollard's the better talent. But is that what we're doing when we're drafting a fantasy football team? Are we trying to find the most talented players and just draft those options? No. Of course, talent matters. Talent leads the opportunity, specifically at the running back position, where opportunity is going to drive everything. But with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I think that he has the potential to be led into that opportunity, even if he's a below average NFL running back, given the level of competition for targets that you have in Kansas City. And with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, the reason I'm willing to say that he can be a top 12 running back this year, even though it's unlikely, is that you're looking at his profile and saying he's a running back younger than Najee Harris. He's a running back that, let me double check this, but I believe he's younger than a rookie in this year's NFL draft in someone like Kenny Pickett. But let's pull this up. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, born April 1999. Kenny Pickett's born June 1998. So yeah, you have Clyde Edwards-Helaire almost 12 months younger than a player like Kenny Pickett, someone that I do think can continue to get better. And there's always the what if case. Now, I'm not saying it's likely, but it's possible. What if Clyde Edwards-Helaire is actually good at football? What if the fact that he had gallbladder surgery last offseason, causing him to lose 15 pounds going into the year, he had obviously a multitude of injuries beyond that during the season. What if those actually lingered to affect Clyde Edwards' play in 2022? If he is just an average running back in this Kansas City Chiefs offense, they'll have a top 10 offensive line with Patrick Mahomes and potentially need to run the ball a little bit more with no Tyreek Hill. I think CEH could be a top 12 RB. And if you're drafting him in the 8th round, even if he's not a top 12 running back, you can still crush that draft price. Clyde Edwards-Helaire right now is being drafted behind Russell Gage, behind Christian Kirk, behind Hunter Renfrow, behind Kadarius Toney. He's being drafted almost 10 picks behind Tony Pollard at the time of this recording. With Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I think you draft him. If you miss small. Hell, maybe he's a committee running back with Ronald Jones, and he's the running back 32 on a points per game basis, but you drafted him as the running back 28. Did you really miss? Whereas, what if he's actually good? What if? Just the big what if game. And he's the starting running back for the Kansas City Chiefs going into his age 23 season. Now, let's move on. Let's go to a more sour note. Let's go to a running back that I've historically really liked. He's going back-to-back in drafts with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Rashaad Penny is someone that I do not think you're going to be able to start in fantasy football after week 4. Now, yeah, Rashaad Penny is going to be the starting running back to start the year in Seattle, but there are a couple different ways that this can go. I think with Rashaad Penny, the number one cause for concern is the injury history that you have. Rashaad Penny was drafted in 2018 in the 1st round. If you look at our running back prospect model, he compares to elite level players. Like Rashaad Penny has always had the talent. However, Rashaad Penny has started 6 games throughout his entire NFL career. He's had 6 games where he's had actually a starting workload. And the reason for this is Rashaad Penny hasn't been able to stay healthy through training camp and through part-time roles in Seattle. I think the risk for injury is always going to be there with Rashaad Penny. And at the same time, you have Kenneth Walker being selected at the top of the 2nd round, a running back that profiles to be a pretty good 1st and 2nd down option that I think will work his way into a committee with Rashaad Penny as the season goes on. So even if Rashaad Penny were not to get injured, if all of a sudden, say he is getting 60% of the backfield and Kenneth Walker's getting 40% of the backfield by the time we get to week 5, can you start a running back that throughout his entire NFL career has not caught passes, is running behind the worst offensive line in the NFL, that has Drew Lock as his quarterback? Can you start that player in fantasy? No, you cannot. So if I'm on the clock and you have Clyde Edwards-Helaire running back 28, Rashaad Penny running back 29, Damian Harris running back 30, I'm not even thinking about it. I'm taking Clyde Edwards-Helaire and I'm moving on. I'm taking the running back that I think at least has a path to a ceiling to be a league winner. Now, let's go to our last hot take. This is one that shouldn't be that hot, but I guess it is. Let's look at the running back 38 in fantasy football drafts in Cordell Patterson, a running back that's being drafted directly before Rachaad White, Isaiah Spiller, and Ronald Jones, a running back that was the running back 15 last year on a points per game basis. My take is he's not going to finish as a running back 4 as he's being drafted. I think Cordell Patterson finishes as a top 24 running back in fantasy. Now, this is a step back from where he was a year ago. You look at 2021, Cordell Patterson was the running back 15. And yes, Tyler Algier coming over is going to have a role. Yes, Drake London is going to be a much better receiver than Russell Gage was a year ago. And yes, Kyle Pitts should see a higher target share as well. So maybe these are all red flags for Cordell Patterson. He's playing in an offense that should be worse and at the same time should have additional weapons to compete with. But what I would say is I would look at Cordell Patterson and go, well, yeah, there are additional weapons to compete with. There are so many targets and so many carries leaving this offense. With the departure of Mike Davis, Wayne Gallman at running back, with the departure of Calvin Ridley, Russell Gage, Tajay Sharp at wide receiver, and with the departure of Hayden Hurst at tight end, that's 272 targets and 166 carries out of this offense. Hell, I don't think that 272 targets are going to go to the combination of freaking Kyle Pitts and Drake London. Kyle Pitts was already over 100 targets last year. It can't get much better than it was. And even if Tyler Algier gets those 166 carries, you're looking at Cordell Patterson as a running back that had almost 4.5 targets per game last year. He's like a beefed up, better version of Nyheim Hines. And I think that running back in a PPR format can be a top 24 option in fantasy. But that's all I got for you. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please go down there, drop a like, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. I'll be live tonight. You know, we're drafting every single night on the live stream on Underdog Fantasy. So if you want to get in a draft with us, go to the link, go to Underdog Fantasy, use promo code FLOCK when you sign up so they match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to 100, and you get our 2022 rankings and draft guide. Thank you again. I appreciate you. I hope you have a great night, and I hope we get to see you in the live stream a little bit later on.